Hi, my name is Jake. The other speakers you'll be hearing from are Hunter and Ben. And our group decided to do our project on the Chicago energy usage data. And this is actually the first page on our website, the home page. So I'll just read through what we have written down right here. The city of Chicago is known for many things. The Windy City is one of the largest cities in the Midwest, but one small but important factor about the city is unknown: energy. A city of this size can only be supported by a large amount of power, right? Well, on this webpage, we will explore how the energy is used in this city and what factors impact energy usage. So if we move into our abstract on this second page here, we'll go into a little bit more detail on exactly what we're doing in our group. So for our abstract, it says, for our project, we are going to analyze the energy usage of different building types in Chicago and determine if there is any correlation between the energy usage and the size of the buildings. To discover this correlation, we decided to look at both building square footage and building stories. We believe that buildings with greater square footage numbers and stories will, on average, have a higher energy usage, while buildings with smaller square footage numbers and stories will, on average, have a lower energy usage. Since we are focusing on energy usage instead of gas, we have excluded any variables related to gas, including monthly therm entries and gas accounts. We strive to find out which types of buildings use the most energy to maintain themselves, and if there is any correlation between energy usage and building size. So from there, if we move on to the data dictionary page, you can kind of see some of those variables that were just mentioned. And I'd like to note, it says all gas and thermal related entries have been removed from the data dictionary, as I just mentioned, because those particular data accounts do not apply to this study. We did not choose to focus on those for this. So if we look at our data dictionary here, we can see that we have the variables in bold on the left. So these are the things that we were using in RStudio to do our coding, and then the description is on the right. So community area name, look at the first one, it just says the name of the community the building resides in and listed alphabetically. If we move down here a little bit further, like total kilowatts, pretty straightforward. Total kilowatts used for 2010, which is the year that the data was collected. Average stories, so the average stories of the building around 2 decimal places. These are just a few of some of the variables that we chose to utilize um, for our coding and our graphs. So if we go from here, if we go look at the clean data, you can see um, the actual data set that we use, and click on that link right there, and it should open an Excel file or a Google Sheets file. And we can see here, this is the clean data set, and there are actually only 48 variables, I believe, in here. There were originally 74, so we definitely shortened a lot of those and took out things that we didn't really need for the purpose of our study. So from here, we'll move over to simple regression, and Hunter will kind of go into a little bit more detail about what we found.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hunter Ferrero, and I'll be walking through with you all the exploration, simple regression, and current model for our website. So, starting with the exploration tab, we first come down here to your regular R Markdown intro coding with the different libraries loading in, as well as loading in the data itself. So, one of the first graphs we made with this data was this one right here, and we compared the total kilowatts used in 2010 compared to the average stories. And to differentiate all of these different buildings, we decided to color them by the building type: commercial, residential, and industrial. And so the reason why we made this graph was just to have a brief idea of what we're looking at. And from what we can tell here is that the average story does have some sort of correlation. As we see going from 0 to 10, you see the almost the majority amount of these buildings in this area. But this doesn't answer all of our questions. As if you remember back to abstract, we wanted to compare the size of each building compared to the total energy used within the year. So if we continue downwards, we would lead to this graph. So now this is just the examination of just the total energy used over the entire year of 2010, which is where this data was set. Now, this is almost something we expected in the sense that it is skewed to the right, and this is just counting how much energy was used. And this is something we would expect in such a large city of Chicago, as it has a massive population, and because of that, it needs a mass amount of buildings to support such a thing. So we would expect such a large portion of this population, and thus the large portion of the energy usage being towards the lower range. Now coming down here, this is the same graph as above, but broken down by building subtype. And now something you might have noticed is that there is no industrial or municipal properties in this graph or in the first one. And some of the reasons because of this, first, for the industrial, we notice that the industrial companies and, well, more specifically, the industrial buildings only use gas accounts. And because we're comparing the square footage to the electrical, the total power used, we just didn't really need the data. So we cleaned that out in the previous section of the clean data. But looking here, we can see that the majority of the energy that is being used is by these multi a multi populated building that's less than 7, and this makes up basically, they're similar to your single families, but are more than just families living together, such as roommates, etc. Now coming down to our final graph, this is just something that we wanted to look at with the electrical accounts, just seeing overall who has the most opportunity to use the most energy. And of course, as we expected, the industrial and municipal, as well as the non-available ones, there is little to none. But we see the most in the multi less than 7 and single families, which does match the graph as above. Now we're going to move on to the simple regression. Here, this starts just the same as any other R document with importing the libraries and the data set. And now this may look slightly off, as most of the data set, as you can see, is in the bottom left-hand corner and all smunched up. Well, that we did this purposely because we want to look at the outliers, the data points that are on the edge. So right now in this, which is different from the graph beforehand, we compared the total kilowatts by the average house size, which in this case, as explained in the data dictionary, it goes by square feet. So from what we expected, that larger buildings will, of course, always use more power, we can see there are several outliers. We see a handful up here, around 10 or so, which when we have certain buildings ranging all over here, but not using even a single fraction of the power that some of these other buildings are using, really calls into question if this relationship is there or not, which leads us to the current model. Now, starting with the current model, again, like any other R document, the library, importing the data, etc. So looking down here, we decided to examine the relationship between, of course, the total kilowatts used as well as the average house size, as we found that to be more significant than the average stories of each building. So looking at this data, looking at this current model, one thing we do want to note is that the square footage is measured in the thousands. So this, and with each node relating to the amount of the total kilowatts used. So if we remember back to the exploration graphs, we saw how the buildings with the less than 7 people made up the majority of the power used throughout of all 2010. And this, in a sense, supports that, stating how one of the first branches we see is under 26,000 square feet, and that's a significant chunk. That's a significant amount of square feet for any single building. And we see how the majority of the power being used is, of course, underneath this criteria. So going back to our abstract, we know that there is some sort of relation between the size of a building, the amount of electricity used in 2010. However, as seen in our simple regression, there is slight deviations. But otherwise, using this data alone, we might be able to pull something out, but otherwise, without data from 2011, 2009, or etc., any other years from 2000, without it just being 2010, it will be hard to pull a definite answer. But otherwise, thank you for checking out the website and have a great day.